an introduction to the language of music. And week 1 is going to be intervals. We're going to talk about what are intervals. And some of you might have the concept of intervals as like a gap between a thing, like you go to the theatre and there's an interval. But in this context, we're talking about how far apart certain notes are. So that takes us immediately to what are notes. For the purpose of this, I'm going to use the layout of a piano keyboard, which I know to some people might just look like a kind of black and white puzzle that's completely meaningless, that doesn't look particularly helpful. We're going to try and find some ways to think about it as a map for understanding harmony and tonality, and in this case today, intervals and notes. So looking at that, immediately there are some patterns that are there, but we're going to make it more obvious by adding some colours and some names. So first up, you can see there we've got 8, I've highlighted 8 notes, and I've highlighted A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and A. We're only going to look at the white notes today. We're not going to look at any of the black notes. We'll cover that in a later session. So what we've got here is what we call an octave, and an octave is 8, so we're looking at 8 notes. It going up in a series, starting with A. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Quite handy, alphabet, easy to remember. And that pattern of A to G continues all the way up. And these 7 notes repeating up and down form the basis of notes that we talk about in the kind of audible pitch range. The way that we break down concepts of harmony, the kind of smallest degrees that we talk about in Western music are tones and semitones. As if we're kind of splitting the atom. And so you've got octaves and you've got chords and you've got all of these different things. But when we break it down, the smallest degrees that we talk about are tones and semitones. So first we're going to talk about the semitone. And the semitone is the smallest unit of notes that we talk about. Semitones are made up of notes that are the closest neighbours. So here within our A to A kind of spectrum that we've got of colours, there are 2 pairs of semitones in here. This one first, which is B to C. I'll play that again. Because you're all muted, if you want to, you can sing this, you can play this. I find it really helpful to get a kind of physical version of it in my own voice. So I'll think to myself, oh yeah, I need to find a semitone. La, la, B, C. And what you can notice about B and C is that they are neighbours. So they're just sitting there with no black note in between them. And this is a moment where it'd be quite helpful if you've got a pen and paper, if you would like to draw out your own version of this. So the little 2-octave keyboard. Yeah, take your time if you'd like to. So what I'd like you to do is try and find the other pair of semitones within our spectrum of A to A. And remember, the semitones relationship is the closest neighbour without a black note in between. Okay, so the only other pair of semitones I can see here is E to F. So those are our 2 pairs of semitones, B and C, and E and F. So we've got B, C, and E, F. As it kind of suggests, a tone is twice as much as a semitone. Semi, half, semitone, tone. So the next one we're going to talk about is a tone. So if a semitone was the two closest neighbors together, and we've got those two pairs of white notes like that, then a tone, being twice as much, has a black note in between. So an immediate example is A to B, which sounds like this. A, B, like that. So if you compare that to B, C, then you've got this one instead. A, B, which is a bigger gap. So the same thing with your keyboards, just go through and have a look and see if you can identify some more tones. These other relationships that we have are C to D, D to E, F to G, and G to A. These are all tones. And this is a really useful thing to learn by hearing it. So distinguishing between things as they're written down like this is really great. But I've also found it's really helpful to do some kind of ear training exercises, and there's loads that you can do online. So we've started having to think about tones and thinking about the fact that a tone is something that can be transferred all the way up the scale. So now we're going to move to the C major scale, which, if you look at it, we're using the same notes. We're using exactly the same notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. But now we're shifting them down to the bottom of the keyboard, which is the C. So we've gone from here. Now we're down here. Because this is a major scale that sits completely within the white notes. So we're just going to work with this one today, just moving from C to C. And this is what a C major scale sounds like. I'll play that one more time. So if we want to break it down into tones and semitones, we've got C to D is a tone, D to E is a tone, E to F is a semitone, F to G is a tone, G to A is a tone, A to B is a tone, and then B to C is a semitone. In some later sessions, I will talk about major and minor tonality and some of the different reasons that they sound the way they do. I'm not going to go into that today because we haven't got time. But if you'd like to know more about that, then let me know and we'll do it in a session. Also, if you would like to kind of ask me any questions afterwards, I'm always up for having a chat about this stuff. So that's our C major scale. If you'd like to kind of add the notes in at the bottom on your own keyboard picture, then that's great. It will be helpful for later. But thinking about this scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. I'm going to introduce a new concept, which is music by numbers. So this is something that some people find really helpful and some people don't. I didn't used to find it that helpful, but then I started using it a lot more in my practice for various things like singing and playing, and it became a lot more relevant once I kind of understood why it was helpful. And I think the best way I can summarize it is that if you can learn to think about music in terms of numbers, the numbers that can represent different notes, it frees up a lot of flexibility to play things in different keys and to understand that it kind of works like, the number system kind of works like a stencil, that you can take the same formula of numbers and place it in different parts of the harmonic kind of spectrum. And you will get things that sound the same, but in different places, starting on different notes. So that's a slightly more complicated concept, but I will come into that in another session. But firstly, we're going to start just by thinking about what all these numbers are. So just as we had C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. As a side note, there's a really fun singing exercise you can do for this, which really helps to learn it, which is just to go 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Which is a really good exercise for learning where an octave is in your voice. You can see here we're going up to 8. When we use it within the context of talking about harmony, we actually usually come up to 7 and then go back to 1, because then you can see you've got the pattern repeating again. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 that's not there. So that kind of 7-note pattern repeats and repeats and repeats. So for me, this is a way of thinking about music that allows like less of a reliance on always knowing what specific note you're starting on, which is good when you're kind of learning things by ear. When we talk about music by numbers and we're reducing things down to intervals, we can think about how there's these little kind of relational gaps between notes. Going back to thinking about a tone, we started off at the beginning, we've got a tone at the very beginning of the scale. 1, 2. When we think about a tone, we can also refer to it as something else. We can refer to it as a second. C to D, we know it as a tone, now we know it as a second. And that's because it's part of a sequence. A second, a third, a fourth. You see where this is going? All of the notes in relation to 1. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, octave. And one of the most useful things for me in kind of practical music application is learning what all of these sound like. I find it really helpful to be able to think, to be able to like, you know, listen to a piece of music and think, oh, I wonder what that jump is, because rather than it being some impossible thing to work out, I can go back to my memory of intervals and their names and think, it's a fifth, so I'll remember that because I've got a name for it. I always remember things much better when there's a name. So that is a second, C to D. This is a third, C to E. This is a fourth, C to F. That's a fifth. And the fifth is a really important interval. I'll probably do a whole chunk of another session on just the fifth, because it's a really, really fundamental jump between notes. You hear it all the time, and it's a relationship that underpins a lot of harmony, is the relationship between the 1 and the 5. Then you've got the 6th and the 7th. It's quite juicy, the 7th. And then the octave. I'll run through those again, going back down. 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and then you're back down to the 1. And there's all of the notes. I'm not expecting everyone to like immediately know how to sing a fifth, that would be crazy. That it's just a thing to work on. So if we're always coming back to the major scale, like that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then you can start getting used to like, I wonder how I get to 5. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the meantime, kind of sing or play all of the notes in between. That's a really helpful way of working, to kind of go through and use it as a map, use these numbers like a map. And the reason for doing it as numbers as well is so that you could start anywhere, any part of your voice, anywhere on an instrument, and find those relationships. Yeah, so we've got our second, our third, our fourth, our fifth, our sixth, and our seventh, and our octave. But the probably final important point to know is that, yes, all of these we know now in relation to the one, but the intervals that we're talking about here, thirds, fourths, fifths, etc., can also happen in relation to each other, not starting from the one. So for example, 4 to 1 is also a fifth, just as 1 to 5 was a fifth, 4 to 1 is a fifth. And this is a really important reason for learning how things sound, which is why I always think like coming back to playing and singing things is super important, because then you're not just thinking about it, you've kind of absorbed it on a deeper level. So 4, 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. It would be in its own key of F, but that's for another session. But that's the fifth relationship, and that is also echoed in other places in the scale. G to D is also a fifth. E to B, which is 3 to 7, that's also a fifth. 5 and 6 is another tone, another second relationship. And they're all over the place. 3 to 6, that's another fourth. And if you look at it as the colours, and this is why I find the colours really helpful rather than just having a black and white kind of maze of the piano. 3 to 6, you can see there's the first notes here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you arrive on the one you're going to. You can end up in a bit of a tangle sometimes with thinking about intervals, being like, well, do I count the one that I start on? Do I count the one at the top? Or I don't know whether I'm just counting ones in between. And this is why for me singing it is super helpful, because then you can think 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah, that's the fourth. Another one here. 3 to 1 is another 6. These are just some random examples that I've put together to show you that there are intervals all over the place. So a sixth is not just 1 to 6, it's also 3 back to 1. And you can kind of play around with these yourself in your voice or in your instrument, or on your little keyboard sketch, and just find some of those other relationships. 2 and 1, that's another seventh. So just as 1 to 7 is a seventh, 2 to 1 is also a seventh. You can go more deeply into all of this, but actually I think a lot of the confidence with this kind of language comes from trying to use it. So I would really recommend, even if you're just kind of getting into singing that little 1 to 8 and back again exercise, it's really helpful for getting that into your own body and into your own ears, or playing it on your instrument or writing it out, and see if you can start getting used to where some of these intervals are. So like counting up for yourself, like I want to find a sixth, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then try and get back down to 1, 1, 6, 1. See if you can remember where you got to or where you started, because that will be training your ear to recognize which interval we're talking about. So that's it really that I want to cover today. Are there any questions from anybody?
That's really great, Beth. I've really learnt something. I've seen these things, but I've never known what they are. So the theory is really helpful. And by what you suggested, try singing the notes in different positions to hear the sounds. That's really interesting as well. And I think by saying the numbers, I can work out what notes are in chords.
Ah, thanks. I'm really glad. It's yeah, it's definitely a way to start thinking about how we use some of these, how we build things like chords, how we build harmony up. It can feel like an obstacle, especially if you kind of already know how to play some stuff. I know it can be like easier to kind of go along with the way you've done it before, but actually to understand why some of this language is used is I know it can be really liberating for people. I know it definitely was for me when I started to think about it in these terms.
I think the harmony just at the moment is a mystery, and maybe I should come to your, maybe I should learn your harmony classes as well to understand it in tandem.
I mean, everyone is welcome to come back to the next one. It's going to be sequential, so the next one will be, I think we might maybe we'll look at major and minor, why things are major and minor next week. I think I'll probably do this around the same time next week, and if you know anyone this would be helpful to, then please do share it with them.
Hi. Okay, this might be a stupid question, but
no,
because that's a major scale,
yeah,
would you then therefore say that all of those intervals are major? So like major second, major third, major fourth?
Good question.
Yeah.
Basically, yes, apart from the fact that we wouldn't use that terminology for all of the intervals themselves. So yeah, the reason that it's a major scale is because the critical intervals in it that make something major or minor are major. So we've got the third, which is a major third because it's 1, 2, 3. And in a minor scale, you'll hear that things are 1, 2, 3. I'll do that on the piano because it might be a bit clearer. Or that's the major, is the minor. So yes, that's a major third. And the other one that's really critical is the seventh. Sevenths and thirds make, in a potted description of tonality, thirds and sevenths make things major or minor. And yeah, we've got a major third and a major seventh rather than the. So that's broadly why we wouldn't use major or minor to describe these two relationships. So we would say this is a perfect fourth and a perfect fifth.
Yeah.
So this is something that I will cover in more depth once we've introduced the black notes, which I think probably will be next week. I'll introduce the black notes because then we've got a little bit more flexibility to talk about the different types of intervals. But on a simplistic level, these are what the intervals are. But yes, the major third and the major seventh in particular, because we haven't flattened them by using the black notes, are what make it a major scale.
Yeah. So the 1, 1, 2, 1 song is always major. Depending on what note you start on, it's a major scale.
I sang it as a major scale because to demonstrate a major scale.
Yeah.
But you could, if you wanted to make it a minor one, you could flatten the 3, especially 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
Minor scales are slightly more complicated because you get different versions of them. So the natural minor scale would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with a flat 3 and a flat 7. So that would be using these keys. And
the do dear song, that's major, right? Do a dear, a female dear.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
That's exactly the same concept. Is is do re mi. So do is 1 1 2 3 1 3 1 3 2 3 4 4 3 2 4. That's too much of a brain jam for me to do like off the cuff, but yeah, it's the same principle. Do re mi fa sol la ti do is another way of you talking about these concepts. I never particularly connected with it, but some people use it a lot. It's used quite a lot in classical music learning. I found the numbers to be generally more helpful, but some people do like the do re mi system. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. But it definitely explore some variation with the 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 exercise, the vocal exercise, and see like what happens if you make one of them a semitone that isn't usually a semitone, or if you make something a tone that's usually a semitone, and like have a little play around and see what you can find within that octave that's not usually there in a major scale. That can be an interesting kind of extension on any homework that you choose to do. Yeah, cool. Thanks for the question. That's a really helpful question. Yeah, I'm going to wrap it up for today. This is a totally no barriers learning session. If anyone wants to put a few quid in the hat, they're very welcome to. Whatever you think that you can afford, or what you think this class is worth. I'm not at all judging anybody for not putting anything in. I'm broke at the moment. Like I'm really appreciating when people are offering things for free, and I'm not worried if people can't do this. I love doing this, so put some quids in the hat if you feel like you can. I'll just put the link in the chat. It'll take you to a page that lets you just choose how much you want to give, if you want to give anything, but there's totally no pressure at all.